Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, my faith in science was shaken earlier today. My faith in you, already shaken, was just shaken worse. Tony, hat science took a major blow today. It was, you feel like you can trust science. You live your life by science, and then something like this happens, Tony, and man, I don't know what to believe anymore.
Yes. What Tom is referring to is Iowa safety Xavier Nwankpa committed to Iowa on Wednesday, and he had three hats on the table. The middle hat was Iowa. And as we all know, the middle hat curse is arguably the strongest force in all of science, all of physics, all of geology, even. And so when I saw that, I was like, whoa, this is going to be the ultimate test of middle hat curse, hashtag middle hat curse, to see if it is the most powerful force in all of forces. But he did select the middle hat. And so that did create a rift in the science time continuum. Now I just have to figure out how to add this to the caveats, because there are two caveats to middle hat curse. Well, three. Now there's four. But the first is anything at like the Army All-American Games or whatever, where people are just the producers of a television show are putting hats on a table. Disregard those. And especially because sometimes those players are standing off to the side of something and not centered. So that's one. The other is anytime Notre Dame, the middle hat curse does not necessarily apply to Notre Dame and Notre Dame commits, because being Notre Dame people, they put the hats out front and center. They're not trying to fool anybody. They want to show you Notre Dame. So they have had some middle hats that got selected. Third, and it's happened once or twice, anytime a live animal is used, the middle hat curse goes out the window. I don't know why that is. It just is. We saw many years ago at this point, I don't know if it was Bobby Wilson, Bobby Hart, Bobby something or other, offensive lineman committed to Florida, had a Gators hat in the middle and had a little baby alligator in his hand, live alligator. I'm not sure if the same thing happened with a baby bulldog, George Bulldog, later on after that, but these are just some of the things. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses. Hat science has been around for a long time, too long, because players, parents, third uncles, advisors have caught on, and they try to outwit hat science. And since hat science was come up, a halfwit came up with hat science, it's not that difficult to outwit it. And so I'm not saying take everything with a grain of salt. I am saying, you know what? Ohio State dodged a bullet.
It is. I do wonder. It is established science at this point, and you wonder if it has become enough of a science that people out there are aware of it now and are intentionally misdirecting. Where I know that they know that the middle hat never gets picked, so therefore I'm going to put it in the middle again, and then they will be mind blown if I pick the middle hat. But now we know that we know about the middle hat curse. So now that means you have to double cross us and not you pick the middle hat again. So look pretty soon for the middle hat curse to return, but in a very sneaky new way.
I think you're onto something, Tom. Also, as we have seen, people have been wanting to disprove science quite a bit over the last couple of years. So I think this is one of those other things as well, Tom.
Speaking of transition, Sonny Styles, how about that? Speaking of getting people out of trouble, Sonny Styles. Not that Sonny Styles has been in any trouble. Sonny Styles went from the class of 2023. Now Sonny Styles can be in the class of 2022. This was news that we had kind of, this was sort of word around the campfire, shall we say, for quite a while now. But then on Wednesday, it came out, and it came out in a very strange way, which was just basically Pickerington North High School. Is it North or Central? He's North, right? No, he's Central. Pickerington Central High School put out a list of players. Come attend our press conference. Players will be signing, and you've got Gillison and a couple of those other guys. You got a couple of guys going to Cincinnati, and Alex Styles will be signing with Ohio State. And I was like, is this press release a year early, or is this news? And apparently it was news. So that was pretty interesting. This is 2 days in a row when it's like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. And it's like, oh, well, the universe has provided us a very interesting story to talk about. How about that?
Yeah. Thank you, Sonny. I've seen him in person. You've seen him in person at least once, right?
Yes, correct.
When I went to see him, they were against a team they were completely overmatched. And I don't know that more than one or two throws ever came his way. And just in case anybody doesn't know, he's the number one safety in the 2023 class, 6'4", 215. Now, Tom, he's a 0-star player in the 2022 class. I think he's at least a 3-star, in my opinion. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm not a talent evaluator. No way is this guy 0 stars in the 2022 class. I am, in all seriousness, interested to see where he does after they're going to have to jumble some stuff and talk amongst their evaluators.
Yeah, they did it. They moved him. He is the number 13 overall player now in the class of 2023 in the 247 composite. 2022, number 13 player in the 2022 class now in the 247 composite. 247 in themselves has him at like 28 or 29, something like that. He is a high 4-star for them, 5-star, number 13 overall player in 2022, based on the composite, which is rivals and 247. And I don't know if they're incorporating On3 there yet, but the ESPN rankings, all that. So they'll that's where he is. So that just came out shortly before we hit record.
Looking at right now to see if so he is ranked the number one safety in the class, which is interesting because Ohio State is lost out on Xavier Nwankpa, as we were talking about, who is listed as the let me get that for you, the number 5 safety. Zion Branch, Bishop Gorman, maybe trending towards USC along with his brother. He is a number 6 safety. So I guess this is not a bad consolation, Tom. However, I don't think he's playing safety, and I don't know how many people actually think he is going to play safety because he's already big. He's only going to get bigger, and he's only going to get better. I just don't know. Maybe safety, like a bullet safety, although who knows what the situation is with Jim Null's new defense. And there are some things that we could talk about with that and Sonny Styles, because I think there could be several different spots where he shows up. But what do you think this means for Ohio State next year?
That's an interesting question, because I think you have to go into this sort of assuming, I think the baseline assumption has to be just treat him as a redshirt, treat him as if he's just going to spend a year developing. He's going to get bigger. He's going to grow into a linebacker ultimately at Ohio State. And we can talk about, where he might fit in the, I think they call it the Leo position in Jim Knowles' defense, which is kind of like the stand-up defensive end / linebacker kind of guy, where they kind of move him around a little bit. He might ultimately end up there. He's not going to be anywhere close to that big this year. I think the safe assumption is figure he doesn't play, because he is still high school age. He is still going to need a year with Mick, maybe 2 years with Mick, to just continue to get bigger, be big enough to be a Big Ten linebacker. That is not something you can necessarily just do straight out of high school, especially when you are still supposed to be a high school player. He is a freakishly good athlete. CJ Hicks is a freakishly good athlete. It's just, I think there's going to be an immediate, thought from Buckeye fans that, well, both of these guys, there is a position of need there. Both of these guys are 5 stars. Both of these guys like top 15 players in the class. Pencil them in right now for, at worst case scenario, like, a rotational spot starting from day one. It's like, I think you got to be a little more patient than that. I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. They may get there. And, it's entirely possible I'm wrong. That has happened once or twice in the past. And maybe they do get to that point pretty early in the season. I just don't think that's really a fair thing to put on them right now. I would approach this as give it some time, see where they are. CJ Hicks, I believe, is going to be in early. I don't believe Sonny Styles is going to be in early. I think he's going to be in. I mean, he's going to be in a year early, but he's not coming in January. He's going to be there in June or whenever. So I don't think it's realistic to expect a whole heck of a lot out of him next year. But longer term, the linebacker room or linebacker adjacent room, whatever that ends up being with Jim Knowles' defense. Jim Knowles is a linebacker guy. They just got a lot better, and I'm pretty intrigued to see what they look like, 2023 season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't expect much from him next year. And for the people who are saying, well, he's going to be starting at safety, if you are one of those people and you are also saying the same thing, Quinn Ewers is going to be starting this year, maybe think about what you were saying about Quinn Ewers and how unrealistic that was. And that's a lot to put on a true freshman, let alone a early true freshman like Sonny Styles. Now, you mentioned the Leo thing, and I was watching some more videos of Jim Knowles. I need to watch more and more and just listen to what this guy has to say, because we mentioned this, I think, in the Jim Knowles show from yesterday about that Leo thing. And it really, he's got this hybrid position that, how everybody else puts their hybrid position, like towards the field, like the nickel back or he'll put his in the middle of the field, which I think is an interesting thing, and just have them go and wreak havoc. Now, it can be a defensive end. He said, I think he said at Duke one year, it was a guy who was 5'8", 5'9", and 190 pounds. And it's just, you need a guy who can, I think he calls it the adjuster, I think, and just be able to do different things. It doesn't have to be the biggest guy. He just has to be able to do some recognized plays and make plays. And it can come from any level, any size, it sounds like. I think as he's describing this, I'm thinking, well, we don't know how big Sonny Styles is going to be at one point or another. This would be something, that Leo thing, or some other people call it the Jack, I think, where he doesn't need to have to be full grown at that point to be able to do something like that. But then I'm also thinking, boy, that also sounds like CJ Hicks could do something like that as well. Where you just, CJ, we're going to put you in the middle of the field, not unlike what they did back in 1996 with Andy Katzenmoyer, where Andy, we're not going to ask you to do much. Just go get the football. And you got the guardrails on either side of you, and Greg Belisari and Ryan Miller. It's like bowling with the
bumpers.
Exactly. So you just go that way, just go get the football. And I'm just interested to see how that is employed. And we'll talk about that many, many times over the course of the next 9 months or so. But Sonny Styles, somebody who could, I don't expect him to factor in next year. I still think you got to figure out what he's going to be. And if he's, say, 6'4", 225, 230 next year, I mean, that's about what, like, Baron Browning came in, or, guys like that. But he looks like he's a pretty skinny guy that can just continue to add. Like, I don't know at what point what's he weigh when he's filled out, like you expect an Ohio State defender to look like. Is he 245? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a little bigger than I would guess. I mean, that's kind of almost like borderline defensive end at that point, or 3-4 outside linebacker kind of guy. I don't know that I expect to make it quite that big, but 235, 230, something like that. More linebacker size, I would say, at least. And yeah, I mean, you've got you look at him. You mentioned CJ Hicks, both of whom are extremely intriguing in this position. Gabe Powers, like we've been talking about Gabe Powers as potentially a linebacker / defensive end. Like, well, that's kind of what this position could be. Is Gabe Powers the guy who does that? Or is some combination of those three guys? Do you have, do you kind of try all three of them there and see which one of them works best? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here.
Steel Chambers
too. Like Steel Chambers, Steel Chambers, I think this year, I feel like, he's not quite Andy Katzenmoyer right now, where it's just like, okay, there's going to be a guy with a brown thing. It's going to be a little bit oblong. that's the dude you want to get. Like, he's not quite at that level like Katzenmoyer was as a true freshman, but there's still very much, he's still pretty early in his learning curve as well as a linebacker. So I think the Knowles thing is really going to work out for him. I think it's really going to work out for those other guys because, again, Knowles is a linebacker guy. He was the defensive coordinator and also did the linebackers at Oklahoma State. So he's thinking in terms of linebackers a lot, which that should be really, 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 exciting for those guys because you're bringing in a class now with 3 guys who you think you'd be pretty excited about, and now you have this guy and he's a schematic guy. It's like, man, this could be really special. By the way, our buddy Bill Landis tweeted something. He tweeted out a link to his podcast earlier today, and used the tweet was just talking about the Knowles, Knowles, and I responded to him that I was so mad that I hadn't thought about that. And he said, well, he had seen a number of other people tweet it out. So I said, great, I'm going to steal it and not attribute it. So there you go, done and done. So yes, talking about the Knowles, I was like, man, that is so good. And if you don't get the joke, just Google talking about the Knowles, Knowles. It was an old Florida State internet thing like 8 years ago. It was like, man, Landis, that was so good.
And follow Bill Landis, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So that's Sonny. He will, my assumption at this point, I don't have confirmation on that, is he'll graduate in the summer, enroll like a typical summer enrollee, and go from there, see how that goes. Let's move to the transfer portal, Tom. There's a report from 24/7, National 24/7, about Ohio State backing off of Eli Ricks, the LSU corner, because they were worried they would lose players to the transfer portal if they brought him in. And you and I talked about this yesterday. I don't even think on the show. And really, Tom and I try to save all of our conversations for the show. We do not actually talk much outside of it. We don't get along. But with the Eli Ricks thing, my thought was, if you are worried about losing one of your 2 second-year guys, Jordan Hancock or J.K. Johnson, for 1 year of Eli Ricks, I would probably back off too, especially if you know like Cameron Brown is coming back. But even if you don't know what you're entirely going to get in Eli Ricks, because he has had injury issues. He's coming off of his second shoulder surgery. He left the team essentially to get his shoulder fixed and mid-season, and that's it makes you wonder, makes you raise your eyebrow a little bit, like, what exactly are we bringing in? They're not bringing in Jonah Jackson, who was a complete team guy and bonded, or Justin Fields, who worked his way up. So I'm sure they do all of their homework. They weigh the pros and cons. I don't know. I don't even know if the report is true, but since it's out there, we could talk about it. And then you've got Buckeye fans who are saying more evidence that this is, Ryan Day has gone soft. He's so worried about team chemistry or whatever that he's coddling his players. And, if somebody is so soft like that, then they should, like, do you really want them? And this is like 2 days after saying Ryan Day should have been playing Quinn Ewers. How can you let him go? This is Ryan Day's fault for not, not coddling him more. So I think it's at this point, because the Buckeyes aren't in the playoffs, there's just going to be some rambunctious people. But I don't have a problem backing off of a guy that you're not sure about. If it's possible, you're going to lose a guy who still has 4 more years to give you. And those are 2 guys. And I don't even know that it's one of those 2 guys. If it's Sevyn Banks, or if it's Brian Watts, if it's Legend Cavazos, I don't know that that's something you say no to Eli Ricks about. But if it's Jordan Hancock or J.K. Johnson, 2 guys who you expect to be starting, if not next year, then certainly for a couple of years. These are guys that were 2 of the top 5 corners in the class. So I think a bird in the hand with 3 years versus a bird in the bush with 1 year. Tom, I don't know the math on that one, but I'm okay with backing off if the loss would have been one of those 2 young guys.
Yeah, and you got to remember those two guys didn't play this year because they showed up in the summer, but both of them were ranked higher than Denzel Burke was in this class. Now, recruiting rankings are not 100% accurate all the time, but that gives you an idea kind of how those guys were perceived coming out of high school. You would expect that you're going to get probably something out of both of them this year if they're both healthy, and then probably more than something in 2023 out of both of them if they continue to be healthy. And you have other depth there, and Ricks is not a sure thing. So, I would not have had an issue if they brought him in, but you also don't know. You weren't privy necessarily to the conversations that they were having with guys like J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke and, maybe Legend Cavazos, maybe Ryan Watts. I mean, whoever we're talking about here, you weren't privy to those conversations they were having with those guys in recruiting. Because if they were told in recruiting, like, here's what we expect, these guys ahead of you are going to be, I'm sure that they were probably expecting Sevyn Banks or Cameron Brown to follow the traditional Ohio State corner path where they, after 3 years or, 4 years, one of them is one of them is a first round pick. Well, there have been injury issues with both of them that have kept both of them around. You've seen, the guys who stick around an extra year or two kind of mess with the depth chart in a couple other places. Jameson Williams, when Chris Olave stayed for another year, Jameson Williams hit the transfer portal because he was not necessarily going to be that dude this year. He was still going to be playing with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and he was not going to get the ball as much. That's not necessarily, everyone wants to say, oh, it's scared of competition. Oh, it's just scared. It's like, well, I mean, if your plan, you're in your mind, your timetable is, I'm going to be here 1 year and I'm going to, sit and watch and learn and, maybe play a little. And year 2, I'm going to start. And year 3, I'm going to be, all Big Ten and a first round pick and out the door, because that's what they sell guys a lot of times. If that's what you're being sold, and then they kind of change the deal on you, like you could understand why that would be unappealing. So yeah, I don't really have a problem with it, which means I'm probably a bad internet commenter.
Yeah, this is a very controversial topic that we agreed on, Tom. We need to plan this out better moving forward if we're going to ever have any success with this show, if you want to call it that. Tom, let's stay in the transfer portal, but look for a way out eventually. Austin Stogner, tight end from Oklahoma, hit the portal. Now, there's crystal ball projections on guys in the portal. He's got 2 to Ohio State right now, 1 to South Carolina. I know Ohio State doesn't throw the ball to the tight end a lot, but if it's between Ohio State and South Carolina, you'd think, geez, the Buckeyes would have the advantage here. 14 catches this year, 26 last year for 422 yards, 7 in 2019 as a freshman. A big guy, 6'6", 250, 260, something like that. Plays a lot of tight end and kind of an H type of off the line kind of tight end. So he's runs all kinds of different routes and is a big target. And you look at this and why is Ohio State so interested? And I think it tells you how they feel about the tight end position right now with Cade Stover, G. Scott, Joe Royer, Sam Hart. We did not see much from Joe Royer this year. I think that was a disappointment. And that yes, he's a redshirt freshman, but you would have hoped to see more from him. Cade Stover still looking to see if he can, is he who he is? Can he become the number 1 tight end? Because I think if you bring in Stogner, he's probably your number 1 guy. But they want to continue to play 2 tight ends as much as they can or whenever they can. And so they're clearly looking to add to that position. Not sure when we will hear something, Tom, but what do you think about targeting a tight end?
Well, I think bringing in a tight end makes a lot of sense because, number one, you don't have a sure thing at tight end this year. And number 2, the sort of the $64,000 question here is Cade Stover was with the linebackers for the Michigan game. So when Jim Knowles gets here, is Jim Knowles going to say, he's mine now, hands off? I mean, that is a possibility. We don't know, we don't know exactly what he's looking for in terms of linebackers, but the depth at the linebacker position is not great. So if you were going to try and solve the linebacker problem by moving Cade Stover back over there, okay, then you got to solve the tight end problem because G. Scott was hurt a bunch this year. Joe Royer had a cast on his hand at one point this year. I can't remember if that was spring or fall, but he missed time. He played in the spring game, so it must have been early fall. I think he had a cast on his hand. So you have a couple guys who are coming back off injury, and then does Cade Stover play on the linebacker side or in the tight end side? Sam Hart was a true freshman this year. I don't know if he even saw the field. I mean, that's and that's it. Like, they want, and Mitch Rossi's done, right? Mitch Rossi's out of eligibility, I believe.
He could come back, I think they said.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I mean, and that's, he is a blocking tight end. He is not someone you're necessarily going to be a big part of your passing game. So Stogner would be someone who would fit in the Jeremy Ruckert type role with this, as a tight end. So that seems like a very logical fit and a position where there are enough question marks with, I think I have very high hopes for G. Scott. I think, when we're doing the 10 Buckeyes who might break out this year show in June or May or whenever, G. Scott's probably on my list because he seems so intriguing athletically that he feels like someone who could be one of those dudes this year. But, there are a lot of question marks there. So, giving yourself another option is probably not a bad choice if that works out for him.
No, definitely not. So that's the portal. We do need to mention CJ Stroud, Heisman finalist. You people, and when I say you people, with the utmost respect, you guys know how we feel about the Heisman, which also with the utmost respect, it's a little overrated. But CJ Stroud is a Heisman finalist, as has been, other quarterbacks in Ohio State's past. In fact, Tom, as I tweeted out the other day, of the last decade, every starting quarterback at Ohio State has finished in the top 5 of Heisman voting. Now, not every year, but at least once in their careers, as long as we're not counting Cardale Jones, which we're not because he didn't finish. He lost his job. He didn't finish. And we're also not counting Joe Bowserman because that was 11 years ago. So keep that in your pipe. Plus, he also lost his job and did not finish as the starter. So Braxton Miller, number 5 in 2012. JT Barrett, number 5 in 2014, did not get invited. Probably would have if he didn't break his ankle. And then you had Dwayne Haskins in 2018, Justin Fields in 2019. And of course, CJ Stroud finishing in the top 4 this year. He is not going to win it. Bryce Young is going to win it. Bryce Young won it last Saturday against Georgia. I thought there was a little bit of a chance when Alabama was struggling against Auburn that Bryce Young had maybe fallen to second. And even if he did, he went back up to first when I think Alabama got the win. Tom, any issues? Will Anderson, 31.5 tackles for loss. And I'll go ahead and then I'll tell everybody why Will Anderson didn't make it and why Aiden Hutchinson did, unless you want to tell him.
I'm going to do a show. Kevin Noon is traveling out to New York to cover the Heisman for us. So we're going to do a show. I'll do a morning scoop show. I'm probably with Kevin probably Saturday morning or so. So that'll be about all the Heisman talk I can handle. It's supposed to go to the most outstanding player in the nation. The most outstanding player in the nation is not going to be attending the award ceremony because his name is Will Anderson. He basically, exploded every possible metric for outstanding play this year. Like, you compare his numbers to literally anyone else. Like, go back and look at Ndamukong Suh's numbers or like any other dominant defensive player. Compare Will Anderson's numbers to them and then say, why is this person not there? And you may remember several weeks ago when CJ Stroud was not allowed to win the award because he was not the best player on his team. Guess whose team Bryce Young is on? Is it Will Anderson? It sure is. Well, that was 3 weeks ago. That was that requirement. Now we have to give the fancy dog Davey O'Brien award to a quarterback because that's what we do. So, okay, here we go. So, all right, thus concludeth Heisman talk.
Very good. I want to move to Garrett Wilson. Last thing here. Our buddy Dan Hope from 11 Warriors went to, an autograph signing and caught up with Garrett Wilson and asked him if he planned on playing in the Rose Bowl and said they hadn't made that decision yet. Has to talk to his family. Tom, if somebody is still deciding on whether or not to play in a bowl game, that to me sounds like they are now also deciding if they're coming back for their senior season. So I think, as we said after the Michigan game, we may have just seen the last of Garrett Wilson. Still haven't heard from anybody yet about opting out, and may have also seen the last from CJ Chris Olave. But Garrett Wilson probably not coming back next year, just as we all suspected.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that, when you watch Garrett Wilson make that catch in the opening drive of the Fiesta Bowl in 2019 as a true freshman, it was like, man, I wonder where in the first round he's going to get picked in the 2022 NFL draft. That was probably the first time that I thought that. Might have thought it in the spring when we watched him, and I was like, oh, he's way faster than literally anyone else they have out there, and he's a true freshman. Okay, he's going to be pretty good then. Might have thought it then, but yeah, I definitely remember when he went about 7 feet up in the air to catch that ball. It was like, oh, okay, well, we'd all better enjoy him for the next 2 years, because that's it. We're not going to get any more than that. And yeah, no, this should not be a surprise. Realistically, you can't fault him for not playing. Like, what does he have to prove? This is the what do you have to prove versus what do you have to gain conversation. And I have zero issue with people opting out of bowl games at this point. And, from Ohio State's point of view, great. Let's see what Julian Fleming can do. Let's see what, this can be. Maybe they're going to move Jackson Smith and Jigba around a little more. Like, go ahead, try move him outside and let Emeka Egbuka play the slot, or play more Marvin Harrison. Like, you can move these guys around, and we're still waiting to find out on Chris Olave. But there are people who I think, if Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave don't play, are going to go, oh, I'm much less interested in watching the Rose Bowl. I'm much more interested in watching the Rose Bowl if those guys are not playing, because then it's like, okay, this is like, super fancy spring game, basically super fancy extra early spring game, where it's like, okay, let's see some of the new guys. Next year starts now. They're not playing for national championship. If the national championship is a standard at Ohio State, this is not a meaningless game. This is the first preseason game of 2022. Let's see some of those young guys.
Yep, I'm with you on that one. All right, Tom, I think that will do it for us today. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. We've got some listener questions coming up in the next episode, unless something else happens, which is entirely possible, because anything can happen right now, and most of it is. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you guys. Seriously. And we will have to edit this part out, Tom, as I just, whatever. Tom, we're going to go. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.